This may be quite an annoying question since you've written a book that talks about 12 rules for life. But just for those in our audience who may not have heard your lectures or watched you on YouTube or read the book, is there a way you can capture the essence of your argument? Is there perhaps one rule above all others or some core argument that you could use to explain
There's probably two, I would say.
Okay.
One of the rules is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And that's sort of twinned with tell the truth or at least don't lie.
Right.
And I'd like to concentrate mostly on the rule that describes the necessity of meaning. And I've spent a lot of time talking to my public audiences about this as well as outlining it in the book. The theme of the book is in some sense somewhat pessimistic because it outlines the reality that we're all ensconced in, let's say, and describes it as one that certainly has an element of tragedy. You know, life is difficult for people, and there's a lot of suffering in life, and it's often contaminated by malevolence because we can take a bad situation for us and our families and our communities and certainly do everything we can to make it worse. And so there's a dark element to life, and in order to be able to sustain yourself through that properly, you have to find something that's deeply meaningful. And you have an instinct for meaning. I mean, I think you can make a strong case for that neurologically. And the instinct for meaning helps you find a pathway through life that enables you to find engagement, a rich engagement that can help you thrive in the face of the difficulty of life. And so, and interestingly enough, and this is something that's really struck a chord with my online viewers, I would say, I think the right pathway to meaning is not through rights and certainly not through impulsive pleasure, but through responsibility.
Right.
Yeah, and so...
Take a look, it's in a book.
Read
your
books! All right, welcome to... I have the wrong Discord chat open. Hold on. Yeah. Welcome to RYB. Read your books. This week we read, or at least I read, my two guests here didn't end up reading it because of some apprehensions about Jordan Peterson, but I ended up reading the thing in full from the text version. They tried the audiobook, a bit rough if you're not a fan of Jordan Peterson's voice. You there, guys?
Yeah, indeed.
Yes, I am here.
All right.
You don't want to listen to Kermit the Frog read a 12-hour audiobook, dude.
I mean, well, true enough. I did end up reading the whole thing. I had a couple pages of notes I took, some quotes. And so, Constantine, you listened to a third of it, you would say?
Yes, around that much.
Around a third of it?
I used to listen to him back when...
And if you've listened to any of Jordan Peterson's online talks, you kind of get the gist of what he's talking about in this book anyways. So it's not that huge a deal. And ABC, you didn't end up looking at any of the book out of disgust or something. All right, well...
Yeah, like procrastination or something.
I mean, fans of Ancapistan will follow in his footsteps, I suppose.
I mean, I would like to also say we were playing EU4 before Jeff told us that it was time to go on stream. So,
yeah.
Put into perspective.
The Herders of the Throne.
All right, I'll start with the discussion then. I had a summary. I don't really like my summary that I wrote. I guess I'll just read it anyways, though. The book is flawed, like Peterson. Some of his conclusions are good and useful. Others are diluted. Most are confused. But it is still contains a fair bit of wisdom. Read the book and try to counter Peterson with whatever personal philosophy you abide by. If your philosophy fails to work, you need to improve it. I, at least personally, did not meet much doubt when comparing mine to his. I even gleaned some weaknesses in my own. For touch-up, the value of the book is that it comes from a person who is old. Peterson is an old man. He has raised children. He's dealt with life in a realistic manner. So on parenting, marriage, and related things like that, his wisdom is pretty on point, pretty well appreciated. However, when it comes to broader society, he's a bit myopic. He's kind of stuck in his ways. And I think some of the solutions he provides ultimately fall quite short. He advocates a radical return to tradition while sort of deriding certain aspects of modern culture like academia and like the socialists and the postmodernists. but he doesn't really attack their underlying source of influence, which of course is the whole mantra, liberty, equality, fraternity, which he kind of clings on to, and that sort of undermines any ability for him to combat sort of the thing he hates that he devotes about a whole section of the book to, the writing. He can't really combat it because he refuses to actually embrace traditionalism. He kind of wants the good parts of traditionalism without the harsh parts because he thinks they're tyrannical. And so this leads to some issues in the book, but I think there's some advice to be gleaned from it, and was at times it was a bit simplistic, at times it was boring, and then there were some decent anecdotes in it. I think he gets a lot of shit. Some of it's deserved, and some of it's not. Okay.
Yeah, what part of the shit that he gets would you say is not deserved?
That he's like totally a kook. So like the in the broad stroke sense, like what he advocates about traditionalism is pretty on point in terms of like, okay, be a fucking man, raise kids, do X, Y, Z, and such, and this is good and this is bad, and betas should not reproduce, and all these other things that he says that are just sort of facts of life. Like that's mostly on point. Like that's good. But there's some underlying issues with it, and then when we get into more detailed discussion of each rule, I think those will become much clearer. And there's a lot of issues in his overall philosophy and like the sort of knowledge that he draws upon, I think. And this comes a lot more evident when you read the book and he starts repeating the same sources of information for like different aspects of his philosophy, and they all kind of I think he's repeating like the wrong source. He's trying to extrapolate his sort of psychiatry stuff all the way to everything, which is true for a lot of intellectuals. So they'll train in one field and then try to extrapolate that to everything. And Peterson does that, and that's where a lot of the issues come up with. All right, so the first chapter talks a lot about lobsters, kind of what Peterson is infamous for. He talks about the rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back. And I have a quote here. Well, I guess you guys who haven't read the book, I guess you can discuss the quote. To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order.
Yeah, see, this is something that Jordan Peterson loves to do, which is like just give like way too much philosophical significance to like very simple things which are self-explanatory. Like standing up with your shoulders back is just, it invokes confidence in yourself and it gives off the impression that you have confidence. It's not like this restoring order to chaos bullshit, you know? I don't know why he does that.
Yeah.
It's strange.
And it's just like this basic self-help principle. Like it's
Right.
nothing more, really.
Don't get me wrong,
You're
it's
not
good
wrong.
advice, but he's just about it. You know, he has like this false sense.
So you're not wrong in that he does sort of elevate it a little bit, but that's just sort of like the title for the little summary chapter, and then his rule. It's not. He talks about a lot of different. Honestly, the thing that I found most annoying about the book was that so he'll state a rule and then he'll go on tangents that are completely unrelated and have fucking nothing to do with the rule, and he's just like rambling on these stream of consciousness tangents in the book for the most part. And then he tries to tie it all back in and like doesn't even tie in at all. And that's like the most annoying part. Like we start talking about like serotonin and fucking lobsters and how this relates to like how standing up your back gives you more serotonin, so it makes you less of a beta cuck, and this is like a good advice for life. And a lot of it is self-help stuff, but then he couches it in sort of this modern psychology nonsense. And the more recent psychology writers is where he bases most of his psychology and like I guess morality for life off of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what did I say about this chapter? I said but he uses a social Darwinistic framework to justify the allegory between animal hierarchy and human hierarchy. The natural existence of such hierarchy justifies its use and value in human society. So here's what he'll often talk about, right, is like how the similarities between the human alpha hierarchy and the animal hierarchy and how like it's so like natural that these animals follow this hierarchy, and it's like innate to humans genetics, and like this hierarchy is genetic, and thus it's been around for so long, and because it's been around for so long, it's like it's so just, and that's where he loses me, is because it's such a naturalistic argument that sort of negates the advancement of thought, and he kind of rallies against thought because he doesn't have clean answers to sort of the empirical nihilism that people criticize traditionalism with. So he just sort of like dismisses it out of hand, and one of the dismissals is this sort of naturalistic appeal that, oh, since we're humans and we're also animals, we need to follow this animal hierarchy. That's how humans live best, which is true in some senses, but also not true.
Yeah, I think that he gives that's like a false sense of value in that, because I think by like the fact that you can recognize that means that you don't have to follow it. Like you don't have to follow animal hierarchies just because you're born of like the same style of being as an animal.
I mean, the
that's like
Peterson says is that it's better, like these hierarchies, their existence and their sort of inaction on humanity is good. And I kind of disagree with that because they're so rough. They're so he kind of alludes that they're so nuanced and complicated, and they've been built up over all this time. But no, they're sort of rough, and they reward behavior that is not necessarily endemic to civilization. If you care about most people living on in sort of a social Darwinistic way, then maybe you can agree with Peterson. But if you have any different sort of values, or you value something more abstract, some sort of more abstract goal for humanity than just living, then you're going to have to disagree with the guy.
Oh yeah, social Darwinism. I mean, I guess that's good if you're like mega Chad, good at everything, but what about like the other people, So it's not a good thing for them. I don't know.
All right. I guess that point I made early there doesn't really apply. We'll talk about that later. And the last point I made for that chapter, because it was kind of the basic stuff I've already heard from him. Stand up straight to get more good boy chemicals and you will be more successful. So that's kind of what I summarized the first rule as. Stand up straight, get more good boy chemicals, be a successful good boy animal, and you'll be more successful. So it's a very naturalistic, biopsychological argument. Okay. And then the second chapter, I guess I wrote little fucking snarky rebuttals after I read each chapter because, whatever. I said, if you look to animals for advice, you will be no better than one. Although for some, that might be an improvement.
Okay. Oh yeah, 100%. That's a good point.
So yeah, and that's sort of like what I got out of the book is like, it's not for me, but I definitely would rather live with Peterson cultists than with like normies who watch TV and love tranny penis. Like I'd rather society be full of like Peterson cultists than tranny lovers.
Right, because if you look to animals for advice, you're not going to be out there like on your knees sucking like a tranny cock all day because animals don't do that.
Yeah.
No, it's not a completely bad thing, but it's just I just don't think it's right. Right. But I guess it works.
Chapter 2, this one's a bit more controversial. Take your pills. And so one sentence he says in the beginning of the chapter is, he's talking about something about psychologists, and he says, this is just one of the many things that make psychologists so wonderful, smiley face. He uses an emoji smiley face in his text.
Really?
Yes. It's just the beginning of chapter 2, and it triggered the fuck out of me. And I just quoted it.
Boomer.
And then I'll just keep going over I guess what I'll do is I'll just read all the quotes I wrote down, and then we can discuss them all. The next quote I had is, before the Twin Towers fell, that was order. Chaos manifested itself afterward. Everyone felt it. The very air became uncertain. What exactly was it that fell? Wrong question. What exactly remained standing? That was the issue at hand. Order, when pushed too far, when imbalanced, can also manifest itself destructively and terribly. It does so as the forced migration, the concentration camp, and the soul-devouring uniformity of the goose step. Well, bucko, you're good enough for a friend, but my experience of you so far has not indicated the suitability of your genetic material for continued propagation. I don't want intellect such as John von Neumann to vanish just because of my barely grade 12 grasp of mathematics. Those are all the quotes I chose. Any standouts
Yeah,
there?
he's like a be mystic kind of guy. When he talks about before the Twin Towers fell, it was order, and then they fell, and it was. Is he referring to like spirituality? Like there's some kind of spirit
Uh,
force work
well,
behind the scenes?
he's obsessed with the dichotomy of order and chaos, and that's sort of like the definition he uses for virtue is like, okay, if things are ordered just enough, then they're virtuous, and if they're chaotic, oh, this is bad. He kind of just replaces chaotic and order for good and evil. He doesn't. It's really just kind of an arbitrary distinction.
Okay.
Yeah, it
She gets
doesn't really
strange.
doesn't like those two labels don't really like mean much
Well,
when
yes,
you look at the
order
way
and
he has.
chaos, and in terms of in a human sense, it's like it's completely arbitrary. Like order and chaos on what time scale? Like on a naturalistic time scale, order is like a planet Earth with no life on it. It's just like a rock. That's like order. In the naturalistic time scale, we're already chaotic by existing, and like you can apply this dichotomy to any scale of time, and it just falls apart. It's like just it becomes so arbitrary from a human point of view to say something is ordered or chaotic.
Right. It's very shallow, like popcorn wisdom. At least that's what it comes off to as me.
Um,
Like it seems like it sounds good when you think about it, but on deeper inspection, you're like, what did he really mean by that? I don't know.
well, yeah, I think he delves a bit too much into that. And then any other quotes that you guys found particularly interesting?
Sorry, Bucko. Can you repeat that one? That
All
was
right.
pretty funny.
Well, Bucko, you're good enough for a friend, but my experience of you so far has not indicated the suitability of your genetic material for continued propagation. So he's talking about how like beta males get friend zoned, how that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And
I don't know
what
that.
I found funny about that was just like him writing in the voice of like say a female rejecting a man. And I just imagined like this sort of like female Jordan Peterson saying "Well, Bucko," and it was really creepy.
That picture where he's like dressed up as a drag queen. Have you seen that one?
Oh
Is that
no,
a shop or is that like just a thing he
I
did? I
no,
don't
think
know.
that's
that's
real.
Oh shit. Well, whatever. Um. All right. So let me just. I guess those were all the quotes. It's funny
but
when he
I will
admitted that
say,
he had 12th grade math skills.
yeah, that's pretty funny too. I think
Uh,
it's weird that he woke on like the beta males shouldn't read strange. I wouldn't think he'd have that stance on it. It's
that's sort
very
of
weird.
all. He talks a lot about that, about how like the mechanism
So,
of society of like shitting over beta males is good, and sort of like the hierarchy, the animalistic, like you need to be a good normie with a lot of success and money and shit to get laid and reproduce is like a good thing. Sort of his notion.
yeah,
Um,
it's interesting.
anyways, I'll read over what my different impressions were. So he uses a smiley face in the text. That was my first impression. He lists piles of children's books and films as representations of archetypal virtue. He beats the chaos and order dichotomy to death, rendering it useless. He falls for the World War II propaganda trick, but believes Carthaginians sacrificed children, when any historian will tell you this was simply Roman propaganda. He says, take care of yourself because we can all be dignified and the normie is the quintessential good.
Yeah,
So yeah, so there's a somewhat embarrassing sentence. He was writing about like barbaric societies, and he mentioned that the Carthaginians like ate and sacrificed their children or something. And that this was Roman propaganda made up while they were invading Carthage, uh, and he fell for it.
obviously.
And then he obviously kvetches about the Holocaust like 10 times throughout the book. He's very attached to the information of his worldview about like obsessing over this,
He
which is
quotes
Yeah,
one big problem as well.
for Jews. He like says that he's friends with a lot of Jewish people. He loves the Jewish people. So I mean that doesn't surprise me.
well, he just comes across to me as someone who was very at one point very womanly and who was
Yeah.
very influenced a lot
Oh,
and
he
clean.
he talks
Right.
about his upbringing in a later chapter, and he was extremely well off, and just had nothing but fortune, and he had a little bit of minor exposure to like being working class, but fundamentally he's just had this like sort of cushy upper class lifestyle.
That's true. He did work for the UN, for example, and normal people don't work for the UN like a normal working class person.
Sure, and we'll get to that. And then for my little quip, I said after chapter 2, it's the moralist may be disappointed when time threatens to erase all direction of his moral coil. So I was just saying that him moralizing about all this this chaos and order shit's like so silly. When like like at the end of time and all this stuff, it's like what is order and chaos? It's kind of such an arbitrary distinction to hang your laurels on. All right. Chapter 3 is make friends that want the best for you. So what do you got? Just what's your hot take on that rule right away?
No shit.
And my hot take on the friends thing is that like you don't really choose your friends. I mean, I guess you do, but at least for me, most of the time in real life, you kind of just meet people that become your friends. So I mean, you don't really get to choose what your friends are.
You can curate your friends and you can look in different sections, but you're right so much that like in the communities that you end up with, it's not like you can, like, unless you're sort of the leader of the community, choose each and every person that ends up there and talks to you and is then your friend.
Right.
So it's a bit, but I mean, I guess as like an adult, yeah, you have a bit more control over people who you actively interact with, not on the internet.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
But besides that, I'll do some quotes. How do I know that I am not myself merely pretending to be responsible while pointlessly helping you so that I don't have to do something truly difficult and genuinely possible? So this is a quote from when he was complaining about people who would sign up for his psychiatry help and then be like completely intractable, would not have any willingness to change. And he said that, wow, it's so pointless for me to talk to you, and you're just basically using me to feel psychologically better instead of actually solving your issues. And then I just found the quote ironic because he then goes and writes a self-help book.
Right.
And then he said, you remind them that they ceased caring not because of life's horrors, which are undeniable, but because they do not want to lift the world up on their shoulders where it belongs. So he's talking about how successful people make people feel whatchamacallit, insecure, and this then has them shirk all responsibility. And he calls the responsibility of lifting the world up on your shoulders, like, having kids, doing a job, doing your business, being an orderly normie, basically.
I think that's easy for him to say from a position of such like well-offness, and especially if he was born into it. Like that's very easy to say. You didn't have to lift the world up on your shoulders. You were born with it on there, I don't know.
In a sense, yeah. But I guess I'll just write my impressions. He said, all right, so I said he had a well-to-do. This is the chapter where he talks much about his life. He talks about how he's living in Alberta and driving around and just having like all these parties and just like wasting away his youth. And he gets to go to like a nice cushy college, and his friends just like drink all the time and just hang out and do stupid shit. It's just like, complete upper middle class, completely well off. Then the second one I said is helping others is dangerous and hedonists are worthless. Just listen to me, Goy. I can actually give advice. So he goes on this whole section in chapter 3 about how there's the person who's like failing in life, and then they'll go and try to help someone even worse off. And then that person who's failing, helping, is like just using that person to feel better about themselves, not going to help them. But then he goes and writes a self-help book and says like, my help is qualified and good, which it's just sort of silly to me. And then he then makes a framework that every person surrounding someone successful wants them to fail. So he makes this sort of dichotomy where the successful people are always making everyone who's not successful feel insecure, like constantly. So like if you walk up to a successful person, by default, you should be feeling insecure, or you're going to be feeling insecure, and you're going to be trying to drag that person down. And he sort of like makes this whole shebang to play into that. And so anyone who's like a narcissist is going to be like, oh, thank you, Jordan Peterson, you're right. Everyone's just after to get me. Everyone's out to get me. They just want to pull me down. And then the summary was just make friends that don't want you to stagnate, stay in the same place.
Yeah, I don't agree with what he says that what would you say? Anybody around somebody successful wants them to fail, because I mean I know it's not true just from my own experience. When I'm around somebody successful, I mean I'm not always thinking to myself, wow, I wish they would just. It just doesn't. It's just weird that he would say that everybody is like that.
Well, I think he's kind of saying that in the context of people who don't follow his sort of traditionalist lifestyle. They're more hedonists, they're more wishy-washy, or have like some alternative philosophy, and so they're just not. They're not like having kids. They're not like doing jobs or being responsible about life. And then he says that those people are just like when you do that, and then you're near those people, they'll be like resentful of you.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. There is a type of person that's like that.
But I don't think it's like all people naturally on his hierarchy. Yeah. If you're lower on the hierarchy that he describes, are you going to feel like resentful for not living up to the expectations of like someone else living traditionally? No, like people have so many different philosophies now that even if you're unless you're following Peterson's philosophy and you actively feel guilty by his standards, then no, you're not. That isn't true.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All right. Chapter 4 was examine your past and think about it. So I had a few quotes from this one. I'll just read all of them. There is no shortage of tasteless artists, tuneless musicians, poisonous cooks, bureaucratically personality disordered middle managers, hack novelists, and tedious ideology-written professors. I thought that yeah. Pot, meat, kettle.
Describing himself, that's what his first thing.
Any idiot can choose a frame of time within nothing matters. So he was using that. He was saying that in response to people who like were being nihilistic. So a nihilist will say, "Oh, nothing. In the end, time will pass and nothing will matter." Then he says in response, "Oh, well, any idiot can choose a time of frame within nothing matters." And then the response to that, which from me based nihilist gang response is, any idiot can choose a frame of time within everything that matters. Any idiot can choose a frame of time where everything matters to him within it. So just like a nihilist is arbitrarily saying that nothing matters, you're arbitrarily saying that this time frame locally matters to you.
Yeah.
Then the next quote was, "The celebrity you admire is a chronic drunk driver and a bigot. Is his life truly preferable to yours?"
Oh, he's a bigot. Watch out.
And then I just I don't know. I felt like a little offended by this stupid statement because like he's smart. Peterson's not dumb in the sense that like he has a low IQ. He reads all this complex stuff and parses complex information. But it's such a liberal socialite stupid thing to say. And I just the retort is the writer is a chronic insomniac of strange meat diets. You want to be like him.
Just bizarre to me that he would fall for the this person's a bigot, therefore they're bad meme, but then pretend that he likes traditionalism, because if you want to talk about traditionalism, the bigotry is inherently involved in that, because
he wants traditionalism, but he doesn't want to give up the feel good liberal nonsense, and this is the flaw, and this is why he never got deplatformed really, and that's why he's popular too, because he doesn't tell anyone to really put down their feel good toys. Not truly. All right. The next quote was, "The Bible has been thrown up out of the deep by collective human imagination, which is itself a product of unimaginable forces operating over unfathomable spans of time. Its careful, respectful study can reveal things to us about what we believe and how we do and should act that can be discovered in almost no other manner." So he's definitely full on cultural Christian, obsessed with the Bible, and lives from it, but he's unwilling to make that leap of faith, if you will. So Constantine, from what you've listened to it, I assume you got to this part where he talks a lot about the Bible. What did you think of his sort of stance on that?
It just feels very I don't know what the correct word to say, but I think it's toast or whatever.
Yeah, milk toast.
Because he just doesn't want to fully accept Christ as in a real person.
Yeah, and I think the reason why he doesn't want to do that is literally just because his social circle of Jewish nihilistic psychology professor friends would bully him for believing in religion. And there's no other reason.
Yeah, he's the only person, if he did convert to be a Christian, he would be the only person that would be a Christian. that he knew and was around. So socially speaking, he can't really do that, especially around.
All right, so I'll read some of his justification for not believing in Jesus. In a world such as this, the hothouse of doom, who could buy such a story? The all-good God in a post-Auschwitz world.
What a fucking honestly.
It's just a cop-out.
Yo, I'm reading right now. I honestly would love to beat him with a stick.
Pretty good.
He's such a fucking Shabbos goy.
Yeah, it's kind of the case. All right, so for my broader notes for the chapter, I said he creates an internal dialogue between metaphorical people and suggests it to readers in need of psychological help. So there's one section in this chapter where he's like saying, okay, so if you're unable to motivate yourself, you procrastinate a lot, you're just like a piece of shit, then you need to like invent like an abstract version of yourself in your head and then negotiate with them. And he has like this whole section where he's like playing that out. I'm like, oh, that's kind of silly. Why are you doing that?
Sounds like a mental illness. That doesn't sound like mentally healthy to do.
And then he says, you could become blind to things you don't spend time and effort thinking about. And then he repeats that for 15 pages or so. So he talks about how like, while you're driving a car, you're blind to how it works until it breaks down. And when you're using a computer, you're blind to how it works until you got to replace it. It's like such a truism. And then he says, Christianity is extremely important to the West, but I will refuse to believe as not to be belittled by my social circle of Jewish nihilist friends. Yeah, it was just my impression I got. Was that so he's so obsessed. Like he quotes Genesis a million times. He talks so on and so forth about Jesus and the sacrifice and all this nonsense, but he refuses to jump into the belief of it just because he would be ridiculed, I think.
No. I think, all right, that too, but I also think that would remove like the fetishistic mysticism of Christianity he's built up in his head. Like if he were to just become an actual Christian, he wouldn't be like cool anymore. He wouldn't be like a mystic anymore. Like he thinks that he's found like some secret hidden meaning to Christianity. Like, all the masses are like these dumb Christians, but trust me, guys, I found like truth.
I get this feeling that he's like this. Like this libtard view of like someone that actually believes in the Bible.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's like some redneck.
What I noticed is that so he harps on the Bible's morality a lot, but overwhelmingly the stories he uses to like quote the morality is Genesis. He doesn't talk about like any other part of the Bible really, except for like Jesus dying on the cross broadly. The only part he cites specifically is Genesis, and I think that's like all he read, like in depth. And then like he just says like, oh, like Christian Genesis morals. It's very, I don't know.
I feel like he just picked and chose the books that he wanted to read from the Bible,
maybe,
and made some new age belief from that.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at before. And then when you said he has this libtard view of what a Christian is, I was also trying to say that. So he doesn't want to be one of those.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be
Look at me, my cool Jewish friends. Look at me, I'm a cool Christian. I have all these ideas.
All right. So chapter 5 is about don't let your children do things that make you hate them. This one's about parenting. This one I think was one of the better chapters because, like he's a parent. He's been around the block. He's an old guy. And he had some actual good advice in this chapter. Less so about his philosophy. So I'll read some quotes. Our eyes locked. He slowly and deliberately stepped on her hands. He's referring to his daughter, who's on a jungle gym, with increasing force over and over, and as he stared me down. He knew exactly what he was doing. Up yours, Daddy-O. That was his philosophy. He had already concluded that adults were contemptible, and that he could safely defy them. That was the hopeless future his parents saddled him with. To his great and salutary shock, I picked him bodily off the playground structure and threw him 30 feet down the field. No, I didn't. I just took my daughter somewhere else. But it would have been better for him if I had. And then the only other quote I had for this chapter was, it was high noon.
What the fuck?
Was he trying to just justify in his head of throwing some random kid?
Well, the kid was stepping on his daughter's fingers while she was climbing on a jungle gym.
Even so,
yeah.
that feels a little extreme.
I don't know. I think honestly, if your kid's being a bratty piece of shit, and that your parents have the right to beat him, I don't mind that. I'm not like a Molyneux poster.
Nah, I don't know. I don't know about that one.
Nah, fuck little kids and their little shit. They'll learn through physics. To be honest.
Dude, you know what's gonna happen to that little boy's brain? Like he's just being a little brat. He's going through a phase, and then some other person's father like beats him because he was fucking with his daughter. Like he's gonna be fucked up for life, guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen.
I don't know.
I'm gonna have to defoo you and Jordan Peterson.
All right. So then on my quotes for the chapter was his experience as a parent and dealing with many parents leads to some solid advice. He has a fatalistic view of parental influence, which is not entirely the case, but is somewhat justified. So he says that if like a parent fails completely at socializing a child, then that child's like irrevocably fucked, which I don't think is completely true, but it definitely hurts, and I would have to agree with that.
I agree with that.
And then he
Not
says,
to the
not to what?
not to the extent that there's nothing that can be done, but you're definitely going to be crippled forever from that.
Yeah, and then I said, some good observations for parents and people who had bad childhoods. Parents need to reward and punish, socialize, and teach their children. Most modern ones completely fail this task. I would say the best section of the book so far, which treats children as the amorphous, unconscious blobs that they are. I think at least his sort of clinical psychology and then like the parenting experience and all that actually leads to some decent advice for parenting and dealing with children and teaching children. I think his advice there in that chapter was decent, and I think purely from the fact that he's an old man who has a family and raises a family, that is the value of the wisdom, nothing to do with his like psychology practice.
Fair enough. His daughter's a thought, though. I don't know. I don't know if he used this advice on
Well,
her.
yeah. I mean,
Well, that's just white women. Never trust white women.
all right.
No, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, chapter 6. Set your house in perfect order, or you change the world. And then the only quote I had for this one is, if you cannot bring peace to your household, how dare you try to rule a city? And then, meanwhile, it is the greedy, brazen, careless psychopaths who often find themselves the leader of nations. So he goes on and on about how, like, oh, you're not qualified to lead if you don't do X, Y, Z. You don't clean your house. You don't have your life in perfect order. You're not like perfectly in harmony and everything's going well in your personal life and everything's great. Then you can't lead anybody. But meanwhile, like the people who actually end up leading are just the people who don't give a flying fuck and just do the most necessary selfish things or sell out the most or do X, Y, Z immoral stuff. It has nothing to do with being responsible, leading in any society, in any history. And I think it's such a like idealistic nonsense to say that you need these qualifications to lead when most of the time the leader is as blind as the people he's leading.
Yeah, and I think that his this opinion of his, the whole like this is basically clean your room. That's basically what he's saying here. It comes from his again his value of like order and chaos, and I don't think it's valid at all. I don't think that your room being clean is the same is any way applicable to like comparing it to you're not fit to run a nation if you can't bring order to your room. I don't know. I think that's retarded. I think it's like the delusional.
Another thing, didn't Hitler have a very orderly social life? Like he cleaned his room.
Yeah.
And he hates it. It's very strange.
Yeah, I know. All right, so what I had for this chapter is he analyzes the resentful school shooters and their hatred of the world. So he talks about the Columbine shooters for a while and how they got to their position through nihilism, and he says, oh, this is terrible. They have so much resentment. And then he says instead to channel that resentment and hatred into minute, gradual improvement of life. So he says, just start with the little things, Goy. Just, you do your little work and then like make your relationships better, just little bit by bit. You can do it, Goy. And then take your pills. He says the leaders of the world must be self-improving and just, but often the person improving minutia will be outdone by a deceitful, uncaring, selfish type who simply takes what they want. That was just my criticism of that whole sentiment of, to be really virtuous, you got to really just get down to the toil and quietly, slightly improve your life. But the people leading don't have improved lives. They just live like whatever the fuck. They don't care about that. They're chads.
Right.
And then just a summary: clean your room, bucko. You can't make moral judgments because your room's not clean. Not that stops actual people in power. I'm sure many of them have dirty rooms.
Yeah, like I said, the values that he holds are like very bizarre to me. I don't understand, especially because he's smart. It just seems stupid to me.
All
I
right.
don't know.
Chapter 7 is pursue the meaningful and not the expedient. Some quotes from here. That's a lot of trouble dispensed with over a very long period of time. So sacrifices are necessary to improve the future, and large sacrifices can be better. So here he's talking about how like the modus of Christianity has made it so okay. So we've got this concept of sacrificing gratification for reward later, which helps us form a better society, and that's like his whole philosophy. And the next quote is, in Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of Son and Self is archetypal. It's a story at the limit, where nothing more extreme, nothing greater can be imagined. So he really, I guess, elevates the Christian story, but he just doesn't believe in it. It's like the most bizarre thing. And then he says, what can I not doubt? The reality of suffering. It brooks no arguments. Nihilists cannot undermine it. Of skepticism. Totalitarians cannot banish it. Cynics cannot escape from its reality. But so he says that his founding axiom, just kind of like how Rene Descartes' axiom is, I think, therefore I am. Peterson's axiom, because this is a chapter where he talks about his personal philosophy the most. His personal axiom is that suffering is real and it happens all throughout the world, and life is suffering. But then, like, there's so many philosophies that even he cites from, like the Taoists, the Buddhists, that just like dismiss suffering out of hand. Like the whole point of like Taoism and Buddhism is going with the flow to such a degree that you can disregard suffering personally and then helping other people do that. And then any empirical nihilist will just say, what is suffering? What are you fucking LARPing about? It's just language, you memer. And so it's not like unassailable at all. It's kind of a silly position to take on the definition of suffering.
Yeah, I agree with what you said completely. I have nothing else to add to that.
Sure. All right. And then I had a lot of impressions from this chapter. So he obsesses over Genesis and the Garden of Eden, almost to the exclusion of the rest of the Bible. So I talked about that earlier, but yeah. So he goes along about like what parts of philosophy and sort of religion and morality he finds important. And he constantly quotes the Genesis in this chapter. I'm just like, wow, it's like nothing but Genesis. And then he theorizes that the idea of delayed gratification and long-term sacrifice led to the success of the West, self-propagated the value, and empowered its eventual dominance. Which, I mean, and I guess you can argue that. But then the East had like a different set of beliefs that didn't have anything to do with, like, it had a little bit of delayed gratification, but not too much. That wasn't really the focus of Eastern philosophy, but they also had successful civilizations. I don't know. He then says, so he grasps at escaping fear of death through proper abstraction, living in philosophy, but then tells the reader that proper living is capitulation, obsession with detail, and being a normie. So he has this section where he's like praising Socrates as being this hero, and he's talking about how Socrates accepted death and how noble and great Socrates is for accepting death. But then it's not present in any of his later thoughts or philosophy. It's like he completely ignores it. He misses the point completely about accepting mortality. I think, and it doesn't embody any of his philosophy, and that's one of my main criticisms of him. Is he's constantly concerned with all these little immortal concerns, and he's constantly telling his readers to get caught up in their own neurosis. He's like a psychologist. That too is also a problem. So Peterson fears nihilism deeply and runs from it instead of going with it. The chapter really jumps around what Peterson considers meaningful, a real mishmash of Christianity, Egypt, Young, Robertson, a bunch of just tons of random stuff. Every paragraph is basically a different author that he's quoting or talking about. And then mainly Peterson uses the Bible for explanation. He's a modern cultural Christian. Peterson praises Christian morality and then claims the failing was in the morality, not the human element, which is used as addressing in the Catholic Dark Ages, which is why he discards it and loves the Enlightenment. So he's a huge fan of the Enlightenment. And he says that the problem of Christianity was it didn't solve people's physical problems. it had nothing to do with that. Catholicism was just like had nothing to do with Christianity. It was just a political institution. So I mean, I found that kind of silly. And then I said, similar to Ted Kaczynski's critique of over-socialization, the value in what Peterson describes as meaningful is destroyed by his overcomplication. A pile of psychiatrists, Bible verses, and philosophers which ultimately don't amount to useful axioms. Instead, the axioms Peterson defends, this pile fall flat because of his personal obfuscation through being overcomplicated. So he just says like too much shit. He uses too much. He cites too much stuff, and it just becomes a giant pile of nothing. And that was my main problem when he talks about his philosophy. Based Ted. Child shit posting in chat. And then I guess I'll just continue finishing off, then you guys can chime in if you want.
Yeah.
Peterson advocates certain moral axiom, derides others, and then falls into the targets of his own derision. In one sentence, he will claim toil is pointless suffering. Then he advocates for the heroism of minor toil in order to give life meaning. And it seems to be he clings to a desperate illusion and refuses to embrace mortality. And he doesn't want to live with mortal concerns. He has all these immortal concerns about like civilization and archetypes and all these other nonsense, which is particularly useful to people. And then Peterson sees meaning as the strange assembly of Christianity, philosophy, and following the norms of current society. He uses the language of order and chaos to define it, but they are too vague to convey the meaning of his meaning. All right. I know that was a mouthful. But overall, it's a mouthful because Peterson's philosophy is all over the fucking place. And in chapter 7, he just goes on and on about different philosophers, religions, ideas that sort of form his philosophy, and it's so ridiculous and out there, and it's just a pile of different philosophies that don't interact or don't interlock with each other. It's like he took like a couple sentences from each and then started trying to build that into something instead of actually building organically on something.
It's like contrived.
And so this is, I think, Ted Kaczynski probably has when he talks about like liberals and then the intellectuals and such, like he describes Peterson perfectly with over-socialization, this self-overcomplication, this obsession with minutia that leads to nothing but impracticality and uselessness. And so there's a kernel there. I can see the kernel under Peterson's thoughts, where he's trying to reignite this sort of idea of traditionalism. But he shoots himself in the foot with a 12-gauge shotgun repeatedly. He's just like, oh, so here's my philosophy for traditionalism. But then he just goes on and on about utter nonsense and all this like pseudo-religious, like mystical stuff, and then quoting all these philosophers that have nothing to do with each other, and these like Jung and like Nietzsche, and it's just, it doesn't amount to anything because there's too much crap. He didn't trim the fat. Epic. All right. I'm really glad you guys are here today.
Oh,
really?
It's actually a lot to like process on the fly because there's a lot you're saying.
Oh yeah, well I mean yeah, but that's because I'm describing a long ass fucking 400-page book.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I hope that you guys have read the books and you could have known what I was talking about, but it's kind of an issue. I mean, we'll just keep it going. As the show goes on, more people will participate and more people will actually read books. I know it's hard for Zoomers to read books, and I think hopefully I can, through this show, get some people to read more books. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Next week you're doing On the Jews and Their Lies, right? I'm going to read that. It's pretty short. Yeah, it's pretty short.
Wednesday we'll be doing Steps to Christ and Jews and Their Lies with Leo Parent. And he'll have read the book, and so we'll have a good discussion. This is me just reading notes, basically, which is a bit rough. But yeah, I think I went over most of what I thought of his philosophy chapter. And he sort of has some good ideas for normies. So he tells normies to pursue meaningful things. But then his like definition of meaning is like so silly and abstract. And it's like the reason he's so obsessed with order and chaos is because like he can't even describe what he fucking believes in one sentence or a couple sentences. He needs like a full fucking 10 pages to cite like 20 philosophers so he can just say like some simple thing about what is the good. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, he doesn't really seem to have any ideas that are like his own. I don't know. It seems all very contrived from what
It
I've heard here.
feels like what you said earlier about how he's trying to run from nihilism. It feels like he's trying to run away from a lot of things from it. So he builds like these really weird, like a pseudo religion of the Bible, pseudo philosophy.
Here's the thing. I'm a huge fan of Seneca. And so I love practical philosophy. I don't care about if something is completely 100% empirically true. I just care if it's like practical, people can live by it, and it's useful. And Peterson tries to do that, but he fails because he overcomplicates everything unnecessarily because he's an academic. And like what value is there in day-to-day life of, like, say, an academic refutation of a philosophical axiom somebody's living by? Let's say choose an axiom, Constantine. Some philosophical axiom. The Bible. Okay. So let's say someone writes like some sort of mathematical proof that the Bible is just full of shit, and then he presents it to you. How does that help your life? It doesn't, right?
Yeah,
it just makes you. Really... It just throws you into, not to sound like Peterson, but the realm of chaos. It's just basically, it's pointless to really get down to the empiric brass tacks. It's the ever peeling onion. You just find something that works and run with it. But Peterson like overcomplicates everything, and especially with what he defines as meaning. And when you're supposed to make that simple, I don't know.
I don't. It doesn't really work that well for normies, because normies don't really. They can't have something too complicated. Otherwise, it just goes straight over their head.
Well, that's why he's popular among normies. So the stupidity of what he's saying, or at least the nonsensical part of it, goes over normies' heads because they haven't read like a bunch of philosophy and books and stuff. They don't really know when he's talking about this. It's like, oh, this guy sounds smart. I guess I should listen to him. Almost his entire career, I think, is based off of like argumentum ad authoritarium, where it's just like, okay, so he's a rich professor who's like an old guy with a family, therefore he has strong social status, and we need to listen to him. Like, almost, I don't think the content of his philosophy is particularly engaging in any way. All right, so someone asked if I read Heart of Darkness, and yeah, I have. I like that book, pretty good book. Oleg says that, and the fact he's trying to justify the inherent contradictions of liberalism. And yeah, I agree. That's kind of the conclusion I came to at the end, is that he refuses to give up liberalism. This makes his entire sort of effort pointless. And that's why he never got blacklisted, and that's why the elite allowed him to continue getting popular. All right, so chapter 8 is don't lie, or at least chapter 8 is don't tell the truth, or at least don't lie, is the title. So here's some quotes. They believe, narcissistic, underneath all that bad theory, that if the world could be put right if only they held the control. So here he's talking about ideologues like National Socialists, Communists, Libertarians. Anybody who thinks ideology can solve the world. I kind of agree with that. I think that's a fine enough sentiment. There's no ideology that solves shit. There's only slightly better states of being. Next quote is, you remember the old joke. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. So not only is he quoted Overwatch, he just quoted Far Cry 3. So I just had to, yeah, I felt, I was feeling the gamer rise up within me when I read this quote in the book. And then and then the next quote is
way funnier than it should be.
To say it again, it is the greatest temptation of the rational faculty to glorify its own capacity and its own productions, and claim that, in the face of its theories, nothing transcended or outside its domains need exist.
What?
What did he mean by this?
Like, dude, word salad.
Well, I mean, he's basically saying that people who like are smart and are on a track of thought, like get blinders to like alternatives, and then he's just like obsessed over like how epic and smart their thought is. And I think Peterson does a little bit of that in this book. So I think him
Yeah, I was
pointing it
gonna
out
say
is kind of
that's
silly.
it's very hypocritical. It's weird that he could come up with that idea in his head, but then not apply it to himself like instantly. I don't know. I don't know, man. He's a very like self-unaware person
All right,
from my.
Ospin, are you in chat? Has Doolittle written a book? Can we do an episode on Doolittle and I can like eviscerate him and you could finally stop worshiping the guy? Like, it's a bit funny. It's like it's almost like a Peterson cultist, except a Doolittle cultist. He
Yeah, we
hasn't
should
written
do
a
an
book
episode.
yet. He's only written Facebook posts. Oh shit!
I'm pretty sure Ozpin is ironically following Doolittle.
I don't know. It's not ironic. I can hear that the admiration in his voice.
The actual like sycophants. It's not. It's not really ironic. I don't think.
All right. So here's my summary for chapter 8. Don't lie. He says people who lie twist themselves, and society which eventually allows corruption. Peterson states to be truthful, but then puts immense value on arbitrary animal socialization tactics, which compel every damn person in the world to constantly lie. This contradiction throws off entirely whatever he aims the reader to accomplish. This is a huge problem with Peterson. So he says you need to follow these traditional mores, and you got to be truthful, and you got to be like this upstanding person. But simultaneously, all this social pressure from like random fucks in society, and like these norms and these like language standards and all this like postmodern nonsense that he complains about. That's what the social norms are. That's what the crowd believes. So you can't. How do you be truthful if the whole point, if like the only way to survive in society, if the only way to like strive and succeed, as Peterson describes, is to constantly lie and or believe the stupid lies that the elite put forward about like tranny dick and all this other nonsense about liberalism. So it's completely at odds, and he never acknowledges it.
Yeah, that's a running theme from what you've summarized so far is things that he'll point out and then apply to his own beliefs or self. So
Doolittle has a primer to Preparatianism on his blog, but it's not well written, just esoteric bullet points. Okay. Well, I'll warmly wait for Doolittle to write a book, and then I'll review it here. Yeah, so that was that point. Point 3 was telling people the truth will usually work out better than half-baked lies. And I agree with this. He talked about some anecdotes from his life where he diffused some situations by telling carefully worded truths, which I think is a decent advice. Making vague, childish plans will lead to vague, bad lives. So if you're young and your plan for life is like some vague shit about like, oh, I just want to retire at 20 or retire at 45. And that's just your plan. You don't have any idea of what you're going to fill that time of retirement with, then yeah, it's pretty vague and stupid. He said ideologues get stuck in axioms that are useless, which I kind of agree with. Self-deceit, lies, and inaction lead to things falling apart, which is happening in current society. Tell the truth to make yourself suffer less, but this won't stop anyone who gains from lying. So he's giving this practical advice to people who suffer, but I feel like to be truthful, and I think in general being more truthful will solve more problems than it doesn't hurt. But the whole like in order to get ahead and climb the social hierarchy, you got to lie like all the time, like constantly.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, I
Forever.
mean, if you just want to make right by yourself and like your family and friends or whatever, you'll always tell the truth. But if you want to, you have to lie.
If you got to be the manly provider and actually get past all the corporate bullshit in the current day, you have to constantly lie. Everyone's living a lie for like every moment. To
he's
do
like
that.
being a beta. Like that's pretty to say you should always tell the truth like a good boy. That's just strange.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I agree that like lying is stupid, but I mean, it's going to be
Well,
a rhetorical advice, and the people in charge are going to lie to you.
yeah.
So, assuming that modern society is righteous, yeah, I think that's a big part. Krikatuna is that he assumes that like it's a huge contradiction in his own work that he doesn't acknowledge, which kind of like takes away from everything he says in the book. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he shills for a hierarchy, but he wants like this sort of like this weird status quo beliefs as well as like granny dick, gays, and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
So he wants the hierarchy, but he doesn't want to get rid of liberty, fraternity, and equality, which caused the hierarchy to be destroyed. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. And he never addresses this. Chapter 9 is learn from other people. Some people are not good at articulating themselves. They go off on tangents. They repeat themselves. They say vague and contradictory things. This was a quote from Jordan Peterson.
Wow.
Now, the crowd is by no means always right, but it is commonly right. It is typically right. You say something that takes everyone aback. Therefore, you should reconsider what you said. And this is when I lost a lot of respect for whatever he was trying to do. Because simultaneously, he's trying to advocate for some self-help that's going to change the behavior away from the norm. And then he says, follow the norm. It makes no sense. I don't think he even realizes what he's doing.
Mm.
It's this weird, like, almost double-think, like, mindset that he's stuck in, and he can't really just get out of.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. All right, so then for the summaries for Chapter 9 is give some good advice on listening and conversing to reach actual conclusions. So he talks about in the chapter about how to avoid being stuck in like a sophist-based debate where people are just trying to win over a crowd and how that's pointless. I'll agree with him on that. He says he derides rhetorical sophists and identifies their emptiness. He gives some decent anecdotes about how to learn from other people, which I guess is decent, like just how to verbally interact and like get information from them in a way that is like pro-social and useful. I guess that's like practical advice because he has to do that for his job of psychotherapy. So, I mean, that's at least decent advice. He says try to learn from others instead of winning in a rhetorical manner, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And you know, that's always been my sort of spiel is I just want to fucking reach new ideas. I don't want to just be like big dick Chad. Oh, I won debate. Well, go nonsense, and that always upset people. But whatever. Chapter 10 is be precise in your speech. The quotes are, maybe both wife and husband alike used the opportunity to mess up their marriage to take revenge upon God, perhaps the one being who could have sorted through this mess. So he goes on this huge tangent in Chapter 10 about like a failed marriage and all the psychological problems and like the nonsense and the stupidity in a failed marriage. And then at the end he says, maybe God can fix it. But he doesn't believe in God. Like, why do you say that? Why are you saying this?
What?
And
What
then,
does he mean by that?
what does he mean by this? And then he says,
Is that funny? I don't know.
He says, don't hide baby monsters under the carpet. They will flourish. They will grow large in the dark. Then when you least expect it, they will jump out and devour you. So he's talking about how if you ignore your problems or your like unsaid concerns, they're just going to grow worse over time. And then there'll be huge problems for you, which I agree with. I guess that's fair. Like if you have problems, voice them early before they turn into huge, like stupid psychological blocks that people are killing each other over. Yeah, so those were the quotes. Anything on that? I mean, if you haven't read the book, I guess these chapters are pretty dense on stuff.
Yeah, it's extremely dense.
He denies that liberalism has a natural endpoint. Well, yeah, no, I don't think he denies. Liberalism doesn't have a natural endpoint, Oleg, but it has a gravitational downward force towards complete degeneracy, and he denies that. Like, there's no actual endpoint to liberalism. Like, it'll just keep getting, like, worse. It'll just keep, like, it'll be bestiality, then it'll be pedophilic bestiality. And then it'll be, I don't fucking know. Who knows how fucking shit it will be 50 years from now. It's gonna be shit, though. He thinks that God is something you can trick yourself into believing, or something like that, or valuing. I don't know. It's just, like, cultural Christian nonsense. Then my notes for the chapter were perception is increasingly simple categories for more complex parts. So he's again talking about how like you don't if your car breaks down, then you notice how the engine works, and you're just like you think things work like magic, and you categorize stuff. It's like I don't even know why he talks about this in the book because it's not particularly useful or relevant to anything he's talking about. He says Our perception and knowledge is flawed in relation to what we rely on in the modern day. Which is like, it's just like one sentence, but it would probably be the scathing criticism that like people like Ted Kaczynski or Manson or like Mason would levy against someone like Peterson. And then he says, speaking about problems solves them, ignoring them lets them win. And then speaking clearly confronts problems and helps people solve them. Which I guess that's true. But that's the thing, right? All of his advice, like they boil down the truisms, and then the things he uses to defend his advice in the chapters is just like, it's like completely out of left field. Liberalism ends with the birth of two-legged animals. Increased technology and biological manipulative capacity will always lead to more degeneracy. Endpoint, I mean going towards the end of absolute equality. But that's the thing, right? I don't think absolute equality may be the stated goal, but that's not actually what occurs like in reality. It's always power games by different groups under the guise of liberalism, and then the further degeneration of society by said groups or atomization. This book isn't a full defense of Jordan Peterson's philosophy, but do you think he talks about it more in Maps of Meaning or something? But the thing is, if he can't defend his philosophy on like these minutia points, then it's fucking stupid. Like if he has to spend, if he makes like a Swiss cheese level argument when he's trying to give out philosophical advice, it's retarded. Yeah, you do. I'm not going to read Maps of Meaning anytime soon. Maybe a long time from now, but I've had enough Peterson in one sitting. I read like 9 of the chapters today. I just sat down and read it in like a binge. I'm just like, oh, oof.
Oof.
All right. Chapter 11 is Don't Bother Skateboarding Kids. So here he's talking about, at the end of the chapter, he's talking about the sort of nanny statism and like the feminization of schools and society and sort of the destruction of the traditional hierarchies and roles and gender stuff. He says it negates consciousness. It's anti-human. Desirous of failure, jealous, resentful, and destructive. No one truly on the side of humanity would ally him or herself with such a thing. No one aiming at moving up will allow him or herself to be possessed by such a thing. So in this chapter 11, he lists like a ton of statistics about like society falling apart because of like all the stupid fucking like sexual liberation under nonsense. But he doesn't admit that the problem is like liberalism. And it's like the most fucking it's the most frustrating bullshit is that he acknowledges all these terrible issues about how the traditionalism he advocates is like becoming impossible because of like these evil postmodern commies, and then he refuses to accept like why the postmodern commies are in power and why their norms rule society and education.
So like it's the answer is in front of him, but he just chooses not to.
Yeah, just like he says people ignore problems until they eat them, he's ignoring the problem of liberalism until it eats him and society. So Peterson begins addressing the mollycoddling state, but refuses to truly examine the reasons for its existence, the rhetoric by which it defends itself, and the mechanism by which it justifies continued function. He states a list of depressing statistics about failed society, but offers no solution. He embraces tradition, but rejects its basic principles because they might be seen as authoritarian. Like the people who ignore problems and let them corrupt, Peterson ignores liberty and lets it corrupt and takes no responsibility. He goes on to describe the insidious ideology elite-sponsored liberalism destroying society. But his only refutation is a meek conservatism. James Mason would accurately describe it as a useless prattling. Peterson advises for men to man up and embrace tradition individually in the hopes something may change. This is out of humility of not wanting to be authoritarian. However, it is also out of his desire for order that gives no opponent to the current order which espouses all that hates. And he advocates for people not to buck the status quo and to value the status quo and socialize along it. And all this does is give more ammo to his adversaries. And then at least Mason's desperate revolution would elicit some chaos and chance for change. Peterson's advice offers nothing but isolated bastions of tradition to be crushed by a degenerate controlling elite and their wave of degeneracy. So that was my summary of chapter 11. This is where he talks about most of the political stuff that got him famous. And he talks about all like, the postmodernists and the danger hairs and the feminists. But he doesn't offer any solution or rebuke them in any way. He just like complains about them. He just whines. Like Mason basically pins him down exactly, or at least his strategy of just whining like a conservative and doing nothing.
Oof.
Nobody. Great conversationalist partner. Where's fucking Extra Gen time when you need him?
Is ABC still here?
I'm here, yeah. I don't want to talk on this. I don't know.
Siege
I didn't
posting
read
on JBP. I mean, yeah. Like honestly,
Well,
Peterson needs to read Siege.
I agree. 100%. Well, James Mason would spit in Jordan Peterson's face.
That would be a debate I'd love to see. Jordan Peterson versus James Mason.
Siege disputes Jordan Peterson, and it's so weird just to even say that.
It literally does. Well, Siege is not just like this terrorist handbook. It actually is kind of
so here's the thing: Mason in Siege, he laments the destruction of traditional society, and that's why he wants it back so badly. But he just has no fucking bones about morality or any of this other like liberal namby-pamby feel-good stuff. And so he just sort of like demolishes all the other people like that who would be Peterson, who would just advocate for this sort of conservatism.
Yeah, a way to also to summarize it up from what I haven't read, but it sounds like that Mason came to the conclusion of he realizes he's going to have to actually fight the ruling class and have some sort of revolution, because the ruling class is not going to let traditionalism thrive.
No,
it does.
No, that's exactly it. It's the fact that you're never going to win power with votes. The ruling class is not going to let you take power.
Change society by self-help book. Like you're not gonna elicit like a change from top. Like the education system's not gonna change because people read Jordan Peterson's book. Like the best you could hope for is that, like, let's say some elite person reads Jordan Peterson's book, is convinced by the language, and then he embraces traditionalism, like some number of elite people do. Like that's the best you could hope for, and that's like not hoping at all. That's not doing anything.
And they embrace traditionalism light, not even actual traditionalism, if they're following Jordan Peterson at least.
It's not even traditionalism. It's just like mock, I don't know what to call it, sort of idea that trying to say it's traditional, but it's not. It's just some control.
He advocates the traditionalism, but he refuses to want it to be enshrined by the authority of society. He's like saying voluntary traditionalism. He doesn't want he doesn't want women's rights to be taken away. He doesn't want any of this other stuff. Like he just wanted to go back to actual traditional society because he likes liberalism and likes the cushiness. But he wants the stability. He wants the order, right? He's obsessed with order and finding order. He wants order out of chaos, and he wants to go back to traditionalism. But like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle if you want to have all this other shit.
He's the opposite of James Mason, like literally opposite man.
Yeah, it's like what Crisco said in chat as well. Like he's never going to remove things like women's rights to vote.
Yeah, if you say that to him, he's like, "Oh, that's unconscionable. That's immoral." But meanwhile, it's like the only thing that, like that and many other things that kept traditionalism as an actual practice. Like it's only gonna get like crazier from here. And I don't think Peterson's cult of even if millions of people like start embodying Peterson's values, it's not going to change the top-down influence of society, the osmosis pressure.
And that's why a lot of the people that they say they were like feminist or whatever, but instead got isolated because they weren't as crazy, I guess, but still would believe in like sort of what would be in a more civilized time loony ideas like women's rights.
Oh,
like a lot of them,
yeah,
like that's Jordan Peterson. He got isolated from the left. He didn't.
Well, yes, he obviously
himself didn't change.
He was a socialist growing up. He was a psychology professor, and then he reached like the end of his life, like 50, 40. I forgot how old he was when he started with all this nonsense, like being a two-bit politician. But he's like, wait a minute, it's like he's having an midlife crisis or something. Like he's like, no, all my liberal peers are fucking retards. Like he just realized that, like he woke up out of a stupor that he was supporting all this retardation. Then he like tried to fix it, but it's like far too late, and like he's too bought into the stupid liberal stuff to really change anything.
And you just see that by like his actions throughout his life, by working at like the UN, for instance, as I said at the beginning of the stream.
Yeah,
that's a huge red flag. Not even red flag. That is like this firecracker, like going out on the sky.
Oh,
right.
For sure.
Yeah, all right. So chapter 12 is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
Man.
All right, well, I didn't have a quote for this one, but this one he talks about his daughter and raising her, and she had like a bunch of arthritis health issues, and like she was constantly on the verge of like having her bones disintegrate and dying, and how like their family dealt with that. I'm like, oh, that's sad. And then he like talks about how he used like his immense money to just like get her like care from all over the place and all these like drugs and specific care stuff, and it's like he's like, oh, this is so bad. I gotta go to the hospital. I gotta pay my money that I have this pile of to fix my kid who like might die. And then he has some other stuff in that chapter. He says anti-natalist gang is counterproductive. It is better to live vigorously in the face of death than the alternative. So he then derides like school shooters and anti-natalists because he had a friend, Chris. He talks about his friend Chris throughout the book a bit. He was like an alcoholic weed smoker nihilist who just like KYS's at 40. We knew from childhood. And he's like, don't do that. Don't be a nihilist because you might end up like Chris. And that's kind of why he hates nihilism, I think. It's just because of his friend from childhood. There's like was the edgy nihilist and like a failure KYS. Like, don't do that. Child BTFO, anti-natalist gang was the only solution to Earth's problems. Peterson recounts his daughter's struggle with dying bones and joints and how he struggled with it. His ample wealth and success allowed him to bend over backwards for treatment. And then he finishes the book saying, be nice to others and take joy in the little things or you're going to suffer too much. Yeah, okay. So that was all 12 chapters.
Nice.
Yeah, all right. So we've summarized it, I guess. And I guess nearing the end here, we also talked about different ideas of like what the main issues of the book are. And I would say the main issue that we touched on earlier was that, so he wants traditionalism, but also liberalism. He wants his cake and to eat it too. And it's just like not going to happen. And it's stupid and naive. He overcomplicates like an academic would his philosophy to such a degree that it becomes meaningless and useless. And so like this is supposed to be a practical philosophy book. He's supposed to be giving practical axioms and philosophies and rules, 12 rules for life. He's supposed to be giving you 12 rules that'll help you live life in like a philosophical sense. And he complicates everything with these random anecdotes, these random statistics, this pile of like cultural Christianity, like the young Nietzsche, all this other nonsense. And he doesn't like he doesn't fully embody any of them. He just like takes bits and pieces from each that he likes, I guess. And it's not synthetic. It doesn't gel at all. It doesn't form a coherent, like I couldn't describe to you what his philosophy is coherently besides that he hates order. I mean, he hates chaos. He really likes order, and he wishes everyone could be a bit nicer to each other. Like that's basically what his philosophy is.
He's just a conservative, like a modern. When you put it in terms of he wants liberalism and traditionalism at the same time, that's
just an average conservative. That's why he's popular among MAGApedes.
And boomers.
And boomers, yeah. So some upsides of the book is that I think I said earlier, the parenting stuff, when he talks about how to parent kids and his experience parenting children, and then like some of the social interaction stuff is pretty decent because, you know, he's a psychotherapist. He has to deal with like crazy people all the time, and like good ways and good strategies on talking to them and like calming them down and extracting information from them. And then some stuff about like anticipating life problems in a marriage. That was some decent stuff. As for all the philosophy stuff, nah, it's like not there. But to say that his philosophy is kind of stupid, and it's like so wishy-washy, and I can't personally adapt it, but I'd rather, like, if a bunch of normies read his book and started living by his philosophy, I'd rather live in that society than the current one. So like in terms of increments, I prefer Peterson to like whatever the fuck to the Lena Dunham. But that's not like saying that.
Yeah, it's not saying.
Yeah, I think this book is best for normies, and that's definitely who it was marketed for. And it will make a normie feel smart. It might like illustrate points to normies they didn't think about, like things like aspects of life and sort of the structures and like bad behaviors they have that they didn't think about before. That might help them, and that maybe they'll like stop being such like degenerate TV watching hedonists. Maybe if they read the book, but ultimately, I think he does not depart. Like, it's so depressing because in chapter 11, he lists all the different statistics of how society is like imploding because of the sexual revolution and like the feminism, all these stupid ideas. And then he talks about how like all these ideas are like in damage like society and the psyche and hierarchy and everything is getting fucked because of these ideas. And he refuses to offer or try any solution. It's extremely frustrating. Jeff, I need more pics of you in cute dress apron. I sent you to Trap. Send them in Snapchat. I got more outfits to send you, so rate for those as well. Thanks,
I was reading that post, and I got very concerned.
Shooters aren't anti-natalist, though. Sometimes you have to trim the weed. No, Ospin, the Columbine shooters were anti-natalist. That was the quote that Peterson used from the Columbine shooters. It was about them complaining about the world being overpopulated, and thus like they're doing their good part by killing people.
We need Chow to unironically defend anti-natalists.
What is
one day
best for normies? Making them feel comfortable, everything falls apart, making them so mad they want this hot house to end. I guess you're right, Nazim. So if you're siege pilled, I suppose, then you don't want people following Peterson because what it'll basically do, it'll empower the current elites. I guess maybe I'm wrong, because maybe like practically in the system of society, if more people start following Peterson, then all that's going to happen is that there'll be like slightly more conservatives in society, but society's just going to keep going down the shitter, like at increasing speed. Maybe you're right. They did their good part for natalism. It wasn't an inside job. But... All right. Well, unfortunately, you guys didn't read the book, and so we can't. The conversation was basically me reading my 6 pages of notes, and then ranting about them, which is a problem. I hope in the future more people from the community read books and want to come and talk about books on the show. I know Peterson was a tough sell, right? I know people in the audience are like, "Wow, Peter Stein! Wow, what a piece of shit Peter Stein is." I gave the book a chance, and right when I finished reading it, I was feeling a bit like less scathing of Peter Stein. But now that I sat here and then like articulated and spoke my notes on him, I'm like, wow, it's actually kind of fucking retarded. So okay, have you read Nick Land's Introduction to Accelerationism? It was fun, based. It's an okay book. I don't know what you're talking about, Osman. Yeah, so I mean, Peterson's just too much all over the place to be giving like solid philosophical advice. And we're going to be doing an episode on Seneca next Sunday. Seneca's on the shortness of life, and I think you'll immediately see how Seneca is a much better self-help philosophy book than Peterson ever wrote. Because Seneca, one, is experienced in a way that, Seneca is also part of the elite of society in Rome, but he's not like a cushy elite. He's like part of the Roman Senate where everyone's backstabbing and murdering each other. So he has to actually be competent, smart, be there. It does not have to be an intellectual where you can be just like fucking lovating and like stuck in minutia in your own psychosis. So Seneca, I think, has a lot more practical, useful advice, and he's much more clearly spoken and less mired in the stupid academic nonsense than Peterson is. So look forward to that this Sunday. Wednesday we'll be doing Pirate with Ellen White's Steps to Christ, and Martin Luther's Jews and Their Lies.
Sounds good.
Nick Land's Introduction to Accelerationism is a blog post. I mean, look, this is like a 300-page book, and I struggled to fill 90 minutes. But that's mostly because my fucking guest didn't read the book, and they were embroiled in being ANCAPs, anarcho-capitalists. So I couldn't really have like a really in-depth discussion, and that's what I kind of aim for here. But it's okay that if it doesn't happen on the first try, because eventually people will get encouraged to actually read books and come talk. So it's fine. I'm surprised no one has said this, but have you even read Loki? Yeah, I read The Locke 5 times. I read the Second Treatise of Government 5 times in college. It's honestly kind of fucking ridiculous. Not for an episode, just because it's interesting? Oh, okay. Oh, that's Wednesday for the double? Damn, I gotta go get some reading to do. You don't have to read both if you want to participate for the double one. You can just read one or the other. That's fine, because I'll have Leo for both, so I'll have at least one person who's read the fucking book. So if other people who want to participate want to come on, you can read one or the other of Steps to Christ and Jews and Their Lives. We'll be doing that Wednesday around the same time, 6 or 7 p.m.
Nice.
Have you read Democracy, The God That Failed by Hop? No, I've actually not read much Hop. I need to. But we can do that later, I guess. That's the good thing. There's plenty of books to read. Never going to run out of those. Base Leo will carry the show. Yeah, it'll help. Damn. How do you guys feel that Ozpin outperformed you?
Oof.
Yeah, that's an oof. I'm not gonna lie.
Let the record show that Ozpin is based in Red Pill.
Can we get some Fs in the chat for Constantine and
ABC? Oof. All right. Well, is there anyone in chat who wanted to come and chat about anything that we discussed on the 12 chapters to 12 rules of life, Jordan Peterson's book, Jordan Peterson in general? Anyone who wants to discuss any of those topics? Anything about the man? With a microphone or not? I imagine not. They would have probably said something by now, but you do. You should do a reading of Waiting for Godot, Cardboard? What did he mean by this?
He's calling me cardboard.
Oh. You intervention music? I did want to go for at least 2 hours, so I guess we'll just shoot the shit for 30 minutes. Maybe I could put like a graphic on screen indicating that we're now shooting the shit. I guess I'll do that. I'll just whip it up in GIMP real fast. Live on stream.
You should do an episode on that Ted Kaczynski manifesto. I thought of it because you mentioned it before.
Yeah, Ted's pretty based and pretty smart. So I definitely should do an episode on Ted if somebody else will be willing to read it. I kind of suspected.
I would come on.
I suspected when I said I was going to do Peterson, you guys said you were going to read it, that you guys were going to fail because it's Peterson. Yeah, I don't blame you. But
right.
I guess with something a bit more edgy to my audience's liking, like Kaczynski, then maybe they'd actually read it on time.
Right. I think he's Anprim, which is pretty based. I like that. I'd definitely read that and come on, and I'd probably have a lot to say.
Anprim? Well, I hope you have more to say than today. Dab.
Dab.
That was a dab. That was a fair dab.
Right, let me quote Jordan Peterson. It's high noon.
That was so funny, dude.
What did he mean by that?
Did he say that?
Yes. Let me pull up the page.
It's high noon. I thought that was your quote about
No,
his quote.
he said it's high noon.
Oh,
I think it's in chapter 2.
what a guy.
It's high noon. Yeah, and then he quotes like, you know the old saying, the insanity is repeating things and expecting the same result. He quotes Far Cry and fucking in Overwatch in 12 Rules of Life. Confirmed gamer.
What's an Overwatch quote? Does he want to be Tracer? What's
No,
going
it's
on?
high noon.
No, I'm already Tracer.
Oh, that predates Overwatch, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just memeing about it, you know. So that's the meme source for the quote. All right. All right, what color should I make this text?
Purple.
Fuck purple.
Fuck
We're
you,
gonna
Jeff.
do like
You're a big nerd.
We're gonna do eye rape piss green. All right. Alrighty. Now we got that. Let me just open that image for everyone to see. So now that we know that we can't even discuss the book anymore because nobody read the book.
It's okay to be upset, Jeff.
Now it doesn't barely shows up because of like such an ugly color I chose. Hold on, let me change that. Change it to like that, and it should auto export. Maybe I have to I do have to reset it. Yeah, OBS doesn't auto export images, which is sad. Or doesn't auto update, so you can't just like edit them on the fly.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Yeah, piss green was a failure. Okay. That's a nice fucking quote. Gamers, the most depressed group. Jeff fell for the reading JPP meme. I want to hear Constantine and Dude read Writing for Godot as punishment for not reading 12 Rules of Life. Writing for Godot.
No.
Gamers, the most depressed group. That's so funny.
You guys, how are you guys gonna make up for this? You guys are. I know you're not gonna read any books.
I already downloaded the PDF for Jews and Their Lies, so I can watch the stream Wednesday with get something
I guess
out of it.
ANCAP actually BTFO'd me because he made you guys not read books.
No. We're gonna make a comeback.
You don't
this
stop
Wednesday.
with this.
This Wednesday, we're gonna make the comeback.
Yeah.
We'll show you, nerd.
Because I wanted to read on the Jews and Their Lies. I just didn't know it was so short and readable, so I'm definitely gonna read that.
Live
I hope
reading
it's
on
good.
stream right now. I mean, I guess I could. I don't know. We could have like a different section of the show for reading random stuff on stream. Like most my voice is a shitty audiobook. I don't know. It's pronounced Godot. I was pronouncing it Godot with like some sort of like hick American. You're right. ANCAP reading. You don't care about Peter Stein. I mean, yeah, but I think it was interesting reading his book. Then it made me understand a lot more like why he's popular, how he got away with like being like this sort of edgelord. It definitely it's such like the intellectual dark web like fits him perfectly.
Oh, stop! That is so bad.
Yeah,
that is so
like the intellectual. He's such an intellectual dark webber. He tells normies being a normie's good. He writes like a 400-page book justifying it.
so based.
Keep the stream going. I will. Yeah, I'm going to keep going for at least another 30 minutes.
Ultimate.
I don't know what the fuck we'll be talking about.
Yeah, sorry for disappointing on not reading. I should have just read it, but it's a chore.
Gene brought alert Simulation and Simulacrum. It's the best book that has a cameo in The Matrix, but it's from a lefty uni professor, but it's based. I mean, there's a lot of books from like not so based commies. We get a live reading of The Vagina Ass of Lucifer after waiting for Godot. I don't know. Let me think. I'm going to think about what we could maybe read on stream to fill the air. I mean, if I read something to you, then you guys are basically forced to absorb it. and then you're forced to discuss it. So like spoon feeding a little baby chick.
It's true. It's
So
fucked up.
maybe I could find something. All right. I'm gonna go on lit, I guess, and then I'm gonna find the poetry thread, and then we'll read some poetry from lit.
Oh no.
All right. Let's see.
Oh Lord.
Wait, there's no poetry thread?
This stream was a mistake.
Poet. Come on, no, there's no poetry thread. There usually is. That's sad.
That is-
Let's really in decline then. What the fuck am I supposed to shitpost? Hold on, maybe I could find some poetry in the thread that talks about Edgar Allan Poe. Oh no, they're just quoting other politicians. All right, well, never mind. Quit blue balling us, pull up Lolita. After fucking Brodalard is fucking fantastic, very important. Any updates on Chubby's Chicken? Oh, for like the Web Yoda Chubby's Chicken saga? I don't know.
No, there's no updates. It's dead.
I mean, it was a forced meme of a dead corpse to begin with, so of course it's not going to be like live.
Jeff, you backed the meme in Discord, and yet you banded us on stream.
I didn't abandon you. I Sukomi'd you.
That was
Aren't
top
you
10.
even a weeaboo? I Sukomi'd you. You got Sukomi'd, bro. You don't even know what that word means.
He was like, yeah, this will be a good stream. It'll be fun. And then we get on there. He's like, is this even real? I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Started trolling.
It was fine, and there needed to be a balance, like a balance in all things. There needed to be order to the chaos.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Well, that's what creates a good stream. You need to have the chaotic so that you can bring the order to it.
Poetry isn't approved by new advertisers. Right, the novel ideas thread. All right. Open discussion about. There's no novel idea thread either. Hold on. There's like no threads about critique or creative writing on the fucking board. That's honestly hilarious. Fucking lit's in decline. Even on YRB, you just send in the Joaquin posting. What the fuck are you guys talking about? Calm down, Dio. Buttonrow is a fun read because he BTFOs commies and capitalists.
True.
Baudrillard is fucking fantastic. Which book from Baudrillard are you talking about? Not really following chat. He's gaslit into be clowning yourself? You need a more aesthetic fast wave background? No.
Yeah, dude, pull up some fast wave music and we can discuss the intricacies of it.
I was listening to some jazz. I was listening to some nice jazz while reading Peterson to make it bearable.
Oh, that's a meme, dude. Don't listen to jazz.
What's wrong with fucking jazz?
It's nigger music, bro. It's not good. It's like if people say it's good.
What are you talking
about?
Not good. Like all the good jazz artists are like autistic white people.
Hey, I haven't heard that, so maybe that's good. I just know about like the shit that all these hipsters
Kilimanjaro Dark Jazz Ensemble.
Like that sounds fine. I'm talking about like jazz that people say, oh, you gotta listen to jazz. Like John Crash. It was garbage.
Yeah, I listened to basically Kilimanjaro Dark Jazz and then Dale Cooper Quartet, like the whole time I was reading the book. Pretty comfy. I quite like that sort of low beat, sort of ambient jazz. Oh, Simulation and Simulacra. Okay. I'm sure Exigent Times also read that book, so maybe when he comes back, we can do a show on that one. Open every stream reading The Man in the Arena While Crying.
Jeff, Exigent Time's dead.
Exigent Time's not dead, alright? Come back.
He'll be
back.
No, he's dead, like the Minecraft server.
He's not dead. Who did I dox? What's the name? I'm interested. Even on RYB, we descend. Okay. Fuck. I was gonna. It would be really funny if there was a fucking post and critique all poetry thread for me to read. There's not. Like, what the fuck? There's just fucking like blog posters and shit. Like Lit is just full of stupid commie children. Hate that. I hate this book. They don't even fucking read books. They just like post about like stupid Jewish nihilist books and how like epic they are for reading like edgy nihilist garbage.
You should that is stupid.
Exit Time should be co-host. Yeah, that was my idea, but then he like ghosted himself from the internet. And I imagine he'll have to do that repeatedly for his work. So he's not going to be a reliable co-host. Join the backup Minecraft server. Tell Dio to drop the bottle and get on. I mean, do you think they're watching?
No, Dio's gone.
ANCAP is watching right now and crying to himself. ANCAP, I know you're watching this.
I mean, you can check the participants if you...
I didn't even know you could do that.
Read Judas Goats. Somebody recommended me on Twitter. Goats. Is that a book? I don't even know. I could read articles like Sargon. Oh, fuck that. I just want to find like random poetry written by some shitter. Maybe there's... Fuck, where do I find that? Fuck. Yeah. Read Mad Sterner. Oh, Sterner would be fun. Yeah, you're right. Read The Last Messiah by Zapfa. It's good anti-natalist poetry. Let's see if we can get a suicide stream going. Alright, well, let me pull that up, I guess. Published in blah, 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 essays. Find like a PDF of this. I have to buy it? It's licensed?
That's pretty gay.
14-page essay / poem that's licensed that I have to buy. Fucking retarded. Not doing that. I could like maybe find it. Pull up the lit catalog and let chat pick a thread. Yeet. I don't want you guys seeing my my settings for 4chan. It's like that's my settings. You guys don't get to copy them. So I'm just gonna pick a thread from lit for you. I'm gonna curate it for you. All right. So here's a thread. The tagline of the thread is green text: 7 nihilistic quotes that only brilliant, misunderstood young males on the internet appreciate. And so the subject of the thread is a post by Norm Macdonald. You know that guy? It's like that fucking...
yeah, Norm Macdonald.
The Enlightenment turned us away from truth and towards a darkling, weakening horizon. Sad and gray to see. The afterglow of Christianity is near gone. And a Stygian silence lurks in wait. Now that's fucking edgy.
Super edgy, dude.
All right. Whoa, so apparently people are saying the tweet is a joke by Norm Macdonald and he doesn't actually believe it. Or he's like ironically edgy posting, or he might just be not, or he might be double irony. He's like, that's what he actually believes. But
no, he's ironic, dude. He's like, he does not believe that.
You're probably right. All right, and then people are saying, wow, Norm Macdonald, why did he say that? Whoa. Did science and knowledge not exist before the Enlightenment? The scientific method was always associated with the Enlightenment. Francis Bacon was the Antichrist, and the Renaissance was the biggest mistake since humanity. To someone. And someone like posts some giant fucking wall of text in response. That feel when still think Russian literature is top tier. Anyone else not spooked by lit memes here? Don't give a fuck what your e-celebs say. What your e-celebs say. I know quality writing when I see it. I guess I'm an e-celeb reading his post. The guy says he knows quality writing when he sees it, and then someone makes fun of him and says, your prose suggests otherwise. So the guy's bad spelling. Base Norm has been reading the Russians. Okay, never mind. This thread's fucking boring as hell. Fuck this. Alright, enough of that. Okay, now this is edgy. Just pull up the lit calendar. Yeah, we're just dead in the water. If there was a poetry thread, I would have just read off that, and that would have actually been fucking fun, entertaining. But fucking lit's a piece of shit board. Doesn't have any content that's like not just like little like college student lib cucks shit posting about each other. Don't even read books. Crime and Punishment, let's read. Philosophy Now, issues.
Good.
Let me click that link. Message retracted. Well, the link showed up on my phone, but not my computer. Huh. All right. Well, Chow, since you read, I'll make Chow and Oleg moderators because they read books. I think that's fair, right?
I can post the link.
So Chow and Oleg, you can post the link. Crime and Punishment. Judging by the thread, maybe ANCAP was right. There's a lot of really fucking stupid threads on Lit about people just like tricking themselves up. I mean, like, I gotta give the props where props are due. If they read books.
It's true.
Alright, The Last Messiah. One night in long bygone times, man awoke and saw himself. He saw that he was naked under cosmos, homeless in his own body. All things dissolved before his testing thought. Wonder above, horror unfolded in his mind. Then woman too awoke and said it was time to go and slay. And he fetched his bow and arrow, a fruit of the marriage of spirit in hand, and went outside beneath the stars. But as the beasts arrived at their water holes, there he expected them of habit. He felt no more the tigers bound in his blood, but a great psalm about the brotherhood of suffering between everything alive. That day he did not return with prey, and when they found him by the next new moon, he was sitting dead by the waterhole. Whatever happened, a breach in the very unity of life, a biological paradox, an abomination, an absurdity, an exaggeration of disastrous nature. Life had overshot its target, blowing itself apart. The species had been armed too heavily by spirit made almighty without, but equally a menace to its own well-being. So I think he's talking about nukes and shit, right? Its weapon was like a sword without hilt or plate, a two-edged blade, cleaving everything. But he who is to wield it must grasp the blade and turn at one edge towards himself. Despite his new eyes, man was still rooted in matter. His soul spun into it and subordinated it to its blind laws, and yet he could not see matter as a stranger, compare himself to all phenomena, see through and locate his... Yet he could see matter as a stranger, compare himself to all phenomena, see through and locate his vital processes. He comes to nature as an unbidden guest, in vain extending his arms to beg conciliation with his maker. Nature answers no more, performed a miracle of man, but later did not know him. He has lost his right of residence in the universe, has eaten from the tree of knowledge, and has been expelled from paradise. He is mighty in the near world, but curses the might as purchased with his harmony of soul, his innocence, his inner peace, in life's embrace. So there he stands, his visions betrayed by the universe, in wonder and fear. The beast knew fear well, in thunderstorms and on the lion's claw. But man became fearful of life itself, indeed of his very being. Life that was the beast to feel the play of power. It was heat and games and strife and hunger, and then at last to bow before the law, of course. In the beast, suffering is self-confined. In man, it knocks holes into a fear of the world and despair of life. Honestly, this is sounding pretty similar to Jordan Peterson, who's crying about suffering most of his book. Even as the child sets out on the river of life, the roars from the waterfall of death rise highly above the veil, ever close and tearing. It's just some emo shit. Tearing and tearing at its joy. Man beholds the earth and its breathing like a great lung. Whenever it exhales, delightful life swarms from all its pores, reaches out towards the sun, but when it inhales, a moan of rupture passes, and corpses whip the ground like bouts of hail. Not merely his own day could he see, the graveyards wrung themselves before his gaze. The laments of sunken millennia wailed against him from the ghastly decaying shapes. The earth turned dream of mothers. Future's curtain unraveled itself to reveal a nightmare of endless repetition, senseless squander of organic material. Suffering of human billions makes the entrance into him through the gateway of compassion. From all that happened arises a laughter to mock the demand for justice. This profound disordering principle, he sees himself emerge from his mother's womb. He holds up laughter. He holds his hand in air, and it has 5 branches, whence its devilish number 5. What does it have to do with my soul? He is no longer obvious to himself, and he touches his body in utter horror. This is you, and so far you don't extend, and no farther. Carries a meal within him Yesterday it was a beast that could itself dash around. Now it suck up and make it part of me. Where do I begin in it? It's just some emo shit. Like I've already grown enough. Okay.
Yeah, sounds like something like Diogenes would write and then read on his channel.
Yeah, like poetry's fine and all, I guess, but make it short, please.
I'm actually not a big fan of poetry as like an art form. Period. I think it's kind of gay. I think it's very pretentious.
Overdeveloped fruit in her head, like the overgrown. That's like a fucking nonsensical standpoint, Chow. Because like just like how the consciousness can go fucking crazy, and like be like antinatalist gang, you can also just ignore it because you're a conscious being, and you could just build discipline. Like this is also what a problem of Peterson. So he, instead of like saying, "Oh, just be disciplined of mind," he like has all this like nonsense about fucking like hierarchy and like being a lobster and all this other shit. That like, why don't you just discipline your abstract free-willed mind? That makes more sense. Just like rein it in control. Start ignoring all natural impulses. Like punish yourself when there's natural impulses. Get rid of them. Work so you can be of free will and have an abstract mind that is of free will, and therefore you won't suffer nearly as much because you're in control. Like I don't know. Weird to me. Jeff is too cool for school and had shit intonation. Here, this does it more justice for you real niggas. Well, child. To be fair, I was reading it quickly because I didn't want to like. 1, it's fucking long, and 2, I don't want to like. I wanted to try to get through it, but it's too long for me to try to get through on stream. So, do the links I post show up? No. If you're not a mod, you don't get links to show up. Anyways, I don't fucking know. It's just like whenever people prattle about like suffering or oh my god, like we can't, our humans or we have consciousness and we suffer so much. It's like stupid to me. Am I the only one?
No, I agree with you 100%. People bitch way too much about the human condition. It's like fucking deal with it, retard. That's what you're given. It's not really that bad either. It's really not.
I don't know, yeah. I'm like, and fucking Peterson wallows in suffering and like his psychosis and like utter nonsense like that in the book. Like he wallows in it and he tells people to kind of wallow in it to like wade out of it. I don't know. I don't think it's particularly effective. That's 90% of philosophy, though. Crying about, no, that's. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe 90% of philosophy is crying about the human condition. But there's a good 10% that is like, okay, human condition, good, we're set. Just live like this, and it'll be more bearable. Like that's stoicism. That's fucking cynicism. That's other shit like that. Other evolutions of that over the ages. I mean, it works. If it worked 2,000 years ago, it works now.
Right.
Shake my head. I thought I was among people of good taste in literature. It's one of the grandest origins of art. Sure, but as far as I view fictional art and fiction and art in general, the only use of it really is to cultivate an aesthetic taste for yourself and for maybe fantasies you have in your head. So really, the only use of art really is aesthetics. And there's infinite aesthetics you could explore and aspire towards or like value, and like it's sort of just your opinion, like what aesthetic you find appealing. So like if you find anime lesbians appealing as an aesthetic, let's say, then that's pretty based. Or if you find like peaceful meditation with like incense appealing as like an aesthetic, sure. But ultimately, the use of fiction is to cultivate sort of aesthetic tastes. And then those aesthetic tastes will just be like an enjoyable facet of your life. And that's about it. It's not like you're supposed to be learning from every piece of fiction or like really like hanging on every word of a piece of fiction like it's some sort of mode of, and this is what Peterson does. It's like he assigns like all this allegorical importance to fiction, where I just think it's mostly just like what do you think is cool looking for yourself. Art is like virtue signaling for social status, putting your surplus capital to show off. I don't know. I think that the fiction in general is more useful in terms of cultivating taste in the aesthetic realm and sort of like your own aesthetic or aesthetics you like, in terms of like collections of thoughts and images and colors and ideas that you find like is an appealing mode of living. But that doesn't, I don't think it has much to do with the underbearing sort of philosophies, pragmatic axioms that you could live life by. Arcturianism.com. Aesthetics are important as well. Not everything in life is empirical. Yeah, that's what I mean. So, like the cultivating a style, a sense of aesthetics, or like an appreciation of style, is the good use of fiction. Like when you're inspired by a piece of fiction, and you're not gonna watch Madoka Magica, and be like, wow, I want to live my life just like Homura does. Like, I mean, you could, but it's kind of like childish, right? And then Peterson never outgrows that childishness. But instead, you could say, okay, well, I kind of like this aesthetic of the these Lovecraftian monsters and then these kawaii girls fighting these Lovecraftian monsters and the time travel and all, and the time travel tragedy and all that. And like this is an appealing aesthetic to you, and you like it, and you can explore that style or think about things in that style, but it's not important to your modal operation philosophically.
Yeah, at least it shouldn't be.
Is important. Social hierarchy is important. Want me to link the Nick Land post? We're gonna wrap up anyways, but maybe, yeah, sure, you can link it, Oleg. Yeah. I did the majority of the talking here. My throat's running dry. Get a drink.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah, that was our plan all along, to make your throat dry.
Nice. That's fucking lewd, bro.
That's not what I meant.
Ooh.
Dab.
Quick and dirty introduction to accelerationism. How long is this? All right. Well, I guess we could read and discuss this real quickly. Fine. I'll do that, then I'll end the stream. I'm already tired of reading for 2 hours, presenting shit for 2 hours, but and I just open up Twitter and I see a really cringy fucking post and I just cringe externally and internally. Oh no. Oh god. All right. Okay, I guess I'll just read this stuff. All right. So this is a quick and dirty introduction to accelerationism by Nick Land. Anyone trying to work out what they think about accelerationism better do so quickly. That's the nature of the thing. It was already caught up with the trends that seemed too fast to track when it began to become self-aware decades ago. It's picked up a lot of speed since then. Accelerationism is old enough to have arrived in waves, which is to say insistently or recurrently. Each time the challenge is more urgent. Among its predictions is the expectation that you'll be too slow to deal with it coherently. Yet if you fumble the question it poses as rushed, you lose, perhaps very badly. It's hard. For our purposes here, you are standing in as a bearer of the opinions of mankind. Time pressure, by its very nature, is difficult to think about. Typically, while the opportunity for deliberation is not necessarily presumed, it is at least, with overwhelming likelihood, mistaken for an historical context rather than a variable. There was ever a time to think. We think there still is and will always be the definite probability that the allotment of time to decision-making is undergoing systematic compression remains a neglected consideration even among those paying explicit and exceptional attention to the increasing rapidity of change. In philosophical terms, the deep problem of acceleration is transcendental. It describes an absolute horizon and one that is closing in. Thinking takes time, and accelerationism suggests that we're running out of time to think that through. We haven't already. No contemporary dilemma is being entertained realistically until it is also acknowledged that the opportunity for doing so is fast collapsing. Suspicion has to arrive that if a public conversation about acceleration is beginning, it's just in time to be too late. The profound institutional crisis that makes the topic hot has at its core an implosion of social decision-making capability. Doing anything at this point would take too long, so instead events increasingly just happen. They seem ever more out of control, even to a traumatic extent, because the basic phenomenon appears to be a brake failure, acceleration is up again. Accelerationism, blah. Gotta have some water next time. Links the implosion of decision space to the explosion of the world, that is, to modernity. It is important, therefore, to note that the conceptual opposition between implosion and explosion does nothing to impede the real mechanical coupling. Thermonuclear weapons provide the most vividly illuminating examples. An H-bomb employs an A-bomb as a trigger. A fission reaction sparks a fusion reaction. The fusion mass is crushed into ignition by a blast process. This is already to be talking about cybernetics, which returns insistently in waves. It amplifies to how and then dissipates into senseless babble of fashion until the next blast wave hits. For accelerationism, the crucial lesson was this: a negative feedback circuit, such as a steam engine governor or a thermostat function, keeps some state of a system in the same place as product. In language formulated by French philosophical cyberneticists Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, is territorialization. Negative feedback stabilizes a process by correcting drift and thus inhibiting departure beyond a limited range. Dynamics are placed in the service of fixity. It's so fucking wordy. A higher level stasis or state. All equilibrium models of complex systems and processes are like this, to capture the contrary trend, characterized by self-reinforced errancy, flight, or escape. D&G coined the inelegant but influential term deterritorialization. Deterritorialization is the only thing accelerationism has ever talked about. In socio-historical terms, the line of deterritorialization corresponds to uncompensated capitalism. So basically, in all of this article, all he says is that the only good part of accelerationism is destroying all states. So there's just like a bunch of corporations floating around, and so like states stop mattering so much. So like the corporations sort of overthrowing the national borders of states and such. The basic and, of course, to some really highly consequential degree, actually installed schema is a positive feedback circuit within which commercialization and industrialization mutually excite with each other, and a runaway process from which modernity draws its gradient. Karl Marx and Nietzsche were among those to capture important aspects of this trend. I don't know about that. As the circuit is incrementally closed or intensified, it exhibits greater autonomy or automation. It becomes more tightly autoproductive. It appeals to nothing beyond itself. It is inherently nihilistic. It has no conceivable meaning besides self-application. It grows in order to grow mankind and its temporary host, not its master. Its only purpose is itself. Okay, so yes, that's sort of like the infinite growth economic paradigm, the obsession with GDP. And like that as a philosophical standpoint just becomes like an endless nonsensical machine that doesn't mean anything. So accelerate the process recommended Deleuze and Guattari in their 1972 Anti-Oedipus citing Nietzsche to reactivate Marx, although it would take another 4 decades before accelerationism was named as such critically by Benjamin Noy. It was already there, and it's entirely the relevant passages worth reading in full. So this is a quote from Benjamin Noyes. Which is the revolutionary path? Is there is one to withdraw from the world market, as Samir Adams advises world countries to do? Is a curious revival of the fascist economic solution, or might it be to go the full opposite direction, to go still further, that is, in the movement of the market, of decoding and deterritorialization? Or perhaps the flows are not yet deterritorialized enough, not decoded enough from the viewpoint of a theory and practice of a highly schizophrenic character, not to withdraw from the process, but to go further, to accelerate the process, as Jay put it. In this matter, the truth is that we haven't seen anything yet. Yeah, like all these fucking academics are so overly wordy. Like, they do not understand that like you don't have to talk in these definitions. You can just. I know they write to fill books and then like have journals be published, and then people think that they're smart, and so they use lots of words that they don't need to use when they're just talking about abstract concepts that could be summed up very simply. I don't know. It's fucking annoying. The point of an analysis of capitalism or of nihilism is to do more of it. The process is not to be critiqued. The process is the critique feeding back into itself as it escalates. The only way forward is through, which means further in. Basically, this is advocating that, like, the only way, if you hate like all the bad parts of capitalism, the solution is to have the multinational corporations destroy all states. Which, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I'm almost at the end, so I might as well just read the rest. Marx's own accelerationist fragment. I'm not going to read Marx, who cares? In this germinal accelerationist matrix, there is no distinction to be made between the destruction of capitalism and its intensification. The auto-destruction of capitalism is what capitalism is. Creative destruction is the whole of it, besides only its retardations, partial compensations, or inhibitions. Capital revolutionizes itself more thoroughly than any extrinsic revolution possibly could. If subsequent history has not vindicated this point, beyond all question, it has at least simulated such a vindication to maddening degree. I guess so, like capital revolutionizing itself, so like the advancement of technology causing the advancement of technology, sure. In 2013, Snernick and Alex Williams sought to resolve this intolerable, even schizophrenic ambience in their Manifesto for Accelerationist Politics, precipitate a specifically anti-capitalist, the left accelerationism clearly demarcated over against its abominably pro-capitalist right accelerationist shadow. This project predictably was more successful at reanimating accelerated question than at ideologically purifying it in any substantial way. It was only by introducing a wholly artificial distinction between capitalism and modernistic technological acceleration that their boundary lines could be drawn at all. The implicit call was for a new Leninism. Fucking course. Of course, the college students call for new fucking Leninism. With the net, capital in its ultimate self-definition is nothing besides the abstract accelerative social factor. Its positive cybernetic schema exhausts it. Runaway consumes its identity. Even utter determination is shucked off as an accident at some stage of its intensification process. So anything able to consistently feed socio-historical acceleration will necessarily or by essence be capital. The prospect of any unambiguously left acceleration gaining serious momentum can be confidently dismissed. Accelerationism is simply the self-awareness of capitalism, which has scarcely begun. At the time of writing, left accelerationism appears to have deconstructed itself back into traditional socialist policies, and the accelerationist torch is passed to a new generation of brilliant young thinkers advancing an unconditional accelerationism. Their online identities, if not in any easily extricable way, their ideas can be stretched out for the peculiar social media hashtag #RetTwitter, as blockchains, drone logistics, nanotechnology, blah blah blah. 2070s now, yeah. Naturally, which is to say, completely inevitably, the human species will define this ultimate terrestrial event as a problem. To see it already, to say we have to do something, which acceleration is going to find. You're finally saying this now. Perhaps we ought to get started. And its colder variants, which are those that went out. It tends to laugh. Okay. Jeez. Blame Hegel for word salads? Yeah, it's fucking stupid. Alright, so that was a word salad. I guess I'll sum it up for the audience. I lost viewers because they didn't want to listen to that fucking word salad. I don't blame you. It's basically all it's saying is that capitalism will accelerate into something else. It's not going to be like state capitalism. It's just going to be like weird anarchy, MNC control, fascism, feudalism thing. It's going to be like way different, and technology is going to be like stupid, and it's going to cause growth paradigms, and humans are going to be controlled by technology, whatever. I don't know. It seemed kind of overly masturbatory to make really a good point. That's all that came from it. So what did you think, Oleg? What did you find important? What's your gist? What was the gist you pulled from it that made that article important to you? We can discuss that point, and then I'll close the stream. Did you guys have any thoughts of it?
No, dude, that was all word salad to me. I honestly don't know what to say about it at all.
Okay. If commies would like to start it over, that should be my guest. This economy's bullshit. The current clash isn't there. Marxist, the old TLDR. Nice co-hosts, yeah. Or co-hosts or NPCs.
I saw that, Chow. Fuck you.
Yep. Chow.
Got him. I mean, I guess if you guys watch the stream, then you guys might come off as NPCs to yourselves. So big oof, I guess.
Oh yeah,
But Oleg, my man, you're the one that made me read this article. What did you get? What were your takeaways from it that made it important? I want to know. Acceleration is a dead man, so that your plan Z after all plans have failed. Epic reminder not to be a reactionary, but revolutionary, and sink the boat. I think what the guy in the article was saying was that accelerationism was just like MNCs tearing things apart and like technology tearing things apart, and not even going to be any revolutions. It's just going to be like technology and capitalistic growth forces. Find the complexity entertaining. Well, this is where we depart, Oleg. I find complexity frivolous and pointless most of the time. That's why I didn't like fucking Peterson. It makes everything overly complex for what's supposed to be useful axioms for life. It's like the worst thing you want to do when you're trying to give people axioms. It's inevitable, according to the accelerationists. I don't know. I think reading it, I see that states are going to stick around. I don't think the states are going to dissolve. And I think the states are going to severely hamper whatever you think is going to occur because of these accelerationist capitalist forces. I think the nation state sticking around is going to really fuck with that. And the nation states aren't going to go anywhere. It's like it's too embedded. It's too much of a triangle. And if threatened, the nation state will retaliate and sort of reassert itself. It's just going to be this unholy combination of state and corporation. And you might say, oh, well, the state's just going to be acting like a corporation, basically. But I think that's not true. The state's going to be acting like a state. And it's going to continue doing stupid shit. It's not going to like break apart because of like forces like that. You're not an accelerationist? Oh, okay. But I mean, I just don't agree with the conclusion that article made. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to the stream. My throat is like fucking dead. My co-host for NPCs, hopefully get some better ones next time. We'll have Leo, so that'll be good. We'll be reading Steps to Christ and Martin Luther's Jews and Their Lies on this Wednesday, the 21st. Be sure to tune into that if you're interested. And the Sunday after that, we'll be reading Seneca on the Shortness of Life. I don't have any books planned after that, but we'll figure something out. So see ya. Goodbye. Good night.